Can this Makita Impact Wrench, that's the same size as this Impact driver, put out over 400 foot-pounds of force? We'll find out in just a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. This is the Makita XWT14Z. So XWT14Z would be the bare tool. XWT14, probably T, I'm not sure the product number, is going to give you your kit. Now we've got ours kitted with two 5.0 amp hour batteries and the charger. That's going to be quite a bit more than the bare tool, but we'll get to the pricing here in a moment. Now this is almost the identical size as this Impact driver as you see behind here. It's an older Impact driver from Makita, but still just an Impact driver. I don't know, probably 100 foot-pounds of force, something like that. But they're claiming that this has 430 foot-pounds of loosening torque and 240 foot-pounds of tightening force. Now again, you look at this and see it looks like an Impact driver body. So be real impressive if they can put out that kind of numbers. Let's quit talking about it. Let's actually dig through some features because we have a lot of stuff to go through, as well as we'll do the testing and then stick around for the results of those testing to see actually how much force this Makita XWT14 produced. Be back in a moment. As we mentioned, this is the Makita XWT14. If you're getting this as a bare tool, it's probably going to be the XWT14Z, and then XWT14T will probably be the kit, which you can get with the two 5 amp hour batteries as you see it kitted with right here, or as you see it installed here. This is an LXT tool. This is a brushless tool, so you see the brushless moniker on the back. And even though they don't classify this as a mid-torque impact, even though the power, they're claiming at 240 foot-pounds tightening force and 430 foot-pounds on fastener removal torque, or nut busting torque, loosening torque, whatever you want to call that, all that marketing jargon. 240 tightening and 430 loosening. Now, when you have that big of a span, that definitely tells me it's actually tuned to do that. Now, I really don't hear it in the RPMs. They sound the same forward and reverse, so I guess they're doing it electronically. We'll hit those numbers here in a moment on our test rig here. But let's go over some of the features, and then we'll be sure to kind of roll through these pretty quickly, even though there's a lot of features on this gun. And then we'll get into actually testing this. First thing, this has more of the body of their Impact driver versus a full-size Impact wrench. And by the way, like I mentioned, even though the power's there to be considered, I would think, a mid-torque, they actually have a mid-torque that's coming out later this year, which is their XWT14. And it does have more of that body look of an Impact wrench other than an Impact driver. So anyway, later this year, Makita is also going to come out with that. Now, one thing I like about Makita, if you don't know Makita Tools, they're a Japanese company, and many times when you look at a German tool, you see the German engineering just kind of exude from it. Same thing when you pick up a Makita tool. Even though this tool is like every other one, it's made in China, Makita is a Japanese company. And to say they're a little bit more attuned to refinement, it would be an understatement. So when you hold a Makita tool, when you look at a Makita tool, if you start looking at the intricate details, you see that additional refinement compared to other brands that are out there. Not saying it's necessarily any better, but I can tell that there's thoughts and processes gone into engineering this tool. Like I said, even though it may not made in Japan, you can see the Japanese engineering, the Japanese intention of making this tool more refined and more adequate to the actual job at hand. They're not after just being the biggest and the baddest. They're after doing the job the best that it can do with the most ergonomics possible, and that side of the business versus being able to do max power, actually exuding every bit of force they can out of this. But again, if they're putting 400 foot-pounds out of this tool, that's very impressive. Speaking of ergonomics, really nice rubber overmolding, like typical with Makita tools, and it carries everywhere from the bottom of the base here all the way up the handle and even into encompassing the the brushless motor and transmission, that sort of thing. You get your acrylic nose cone here, which again, pretty synonymous to their impact driver. Then you get a double cob LED right here, which by the way, you can turn on and off. And you get some flex here in the handle as well, which again is kind of built into that tool for shock absorption, if you will. It's even more prevalent in their impact wrenches, but still, you'll see some flex in that base that's built in there, and it'll withstand a lot of blows. This comes with the XWT14 is the hog ring style or friction ring style 1/2-inch anvil. You can also get this in the XWT15, which is the same tool, except you get a push button detent. But you can see it's also set up for a pin and O-ring as well. So if you've got pin sockets, you can use those as well. It's already pre-drilled, so that anvil's going to handle that. Typical directional lever here for forward and reverse, and you get a variable speed trigger, so you can vary these RPMs no matter what speed you're in, with the exception of one of the modes. I'll talk about that here in a moment. There's multiple modes on this gun, but anyway, you can see I can vary this depending on what speed I'm in. And by the way, there's multiple modes, so let's call it 4 speeds. And with that variable speed trigger, in speed 1, you're looking at 1,000 RPMs and 1,800 impacts per minute on speed 1. That's your max, but of course you can start as slow as you want. I can make this thing almost crawl. Speed 2, you're gonna get 1,800 RPMs and 2,600 impacts per minute. So if we go to speed 2, again, that's going to be 1,800 RPMs and 2,600 IPMs or impacts per minute. And then going to speed 3, you're going to get 2,600 RPMs and 3,400 impacts per minute. And then going into speed 4, or in the max mode, if you will, you're looking at 3,200 RPMs and 4,000 impacts per minute. And again, that's your max, and you can vary that based on the trigger. Now you see all these modes down here. There are multiple modes. There's 3 auto modes. You saw that when we were going in each one of these speeds. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then going into 4. But in the auto mode, so when I put in the auto fastening or auto tightening mode, what that's going to do, it's going to take it to a certain amount of tightening and then stop. As well as when you're backing it off, it's going to back off until it senses that it's loose, and then it's going to lower that power, lower that RPMs. Again, we'll talk about that here in a moment. They also have a max mode, a max speed mode. What that does, if I hold the mode button down and that lightens that, what that does is reduce the trigger pull to get the max RPM. You can see I barely pull this trigger, and it's less of a variable speed trigger now. So you can turn that mode on, and if for some reason you want wide open really quick, with hardly any trigger pull, you're at wide open throttle. Whereas typically, if I turn that mode off, you see I have more of a trigger pull to get to wide open throttle. So again, that's not a bad idea. I mean, if you got every other mode, might as well do that. Obviously, they've had some recommendations on that. So again, if you're needing max speed all the time, that's a great mode to put it in to be able to do it. Again, you get 3 speeds of auto modes on auto tightening as well as auto reverse. And again, we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then you can also, turn that LED light off as well. So just with the push of a button. And now if you don't need that LED, maybe save a little energy, or maybe you don't want the light shining on it, you can easily turn that off and turn it back on. And that's going to come on with that trigger pull and then go off after, I think, 5 seconds. So let's go ahead and try this thing out. Let's use it on some of these nuts on this rig here, and let's see how well it does, and see if this little guy can actually lay down the kind of power they're talking about. But before we do that, let's take a couple of measurements here. Gonna lay this down. I think this is a little over 5 inches. So there we go. Tighten this down, and we're right at 5 3/4 inches on that. Yep, so right at 5 3/4, maybe just a little less. And then as far as, let's see here how tall it is. So as far as height, you're looking at right at 9 3/4 inches. So 5 3/4 inch from tip to tail, and then 9 3/4 inches tall. That's with that 5 amp hour battery on there, which, by the way, I don't care about any measurements without the battery. I'm going to measure it how I'm going to have it set up. So let's go ahead and take a weight as well. Turn this on, and we'll weigh it with the battery also. I think it's around 4 pounds. So we're zeroed out, and wow, can't get any closer than that. So 4 pounds even. And then we'll change the units, and we'll get a gram reading here. So we're 1,810 grams. That's with the 5 amp hour battery. So as you would use this tool, with the exception of a socket on there, you're looking at 1,810 grams, or 4 pounds, 0 ounces. Wow, good job hitting that number. Anyway, so nice light tool, nice small tool. And again, if they're putting down over 400 foot-pounds with this as far as removal, that's pretty good. So let's try it out. The first test we're going to do is we're actually going to take the Impact, and we've got it in speed 4 here. So max speed, no automatic, no auto mode, anything else. So just max speed. And we're going to tighten these down for 5 seconds each. We're going to use our torque wrench to back them off and get a good idea of what the fastening torque that this is laying down is. So it's supposed to be, I think, 230, 240. So we'll test that and see. So again, we're going to tighten these down. We're going to do a row of 5. We'll come back and we'll do another 5 so we can get 10 results. And then we'll figure out what type of, at least a general idea of the amount of fastening torque. So here we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to take our handy dandy torque wrench here, and we're going to back these off and get a good rating of the amount of force it takes to break that free. Now, if it's laying down 240 foot-pounds, I would say it should be somewhere in the 180 to break those free, and then we'll go from there. So I've got my torque wrench set to 250 foot-pounds, which really doesn't matter. Again, we're going into loosening mode. And here we go. Zeroed out. 196. 203.9. 211.6. 202.4. And last one here. 187.2. Now let's go ahead and do that one more time, another row of 5, and that'll give us 10 results. Okay, so that's 10. Let's see if we dropped any bars. Now we still got 4 bars on our 5 amp hour battery. So again, we're cleared out, and let's do the first one. 198.7, 228.5, that's a high one. 208.5, 216.0, and last one, 192.8. Now what we'll do is we'll take those numbers and we'll divide by a factor, because we are loosening those bolts with the torque wrench, so it takes less force than tightening them, and we'll come up with a number that should be a good all-around idea of what type of force it actually took to tighten those bolts down in order for us to break those free. So we'll bring those to you in just one moment. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my torque gun here. So I have a torque gun here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this to 250 foot-pounds. So I'm going to torque 2 of these bolts to 250 foot-pounds, and then I'm going to torque 2 of them at 300 foot-pounds, and then I'm going to torque 1 of them at 350 foot-pounds. So there's 250. There's another 250. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to 300 now. You know what, let's go to 350. So now I'm going to go, so these are 250. I'm going to go 350 here. 350 here. And then we'll do the last one at 400. So the last one here is going to be at 400 foot-pounds. Okay, now those are torqued. We're going to go into reverse mode and we're going to see what it takes. See if this will actually break those free. Should not have a problem with, I would say, the first four. The last one's 400 foot-pounds, getting close to its max, so we'll see what it's got. Okay, 250 foot-pounds. No problem at all, didn't figure it would. Another 250. No problem at all. Now we're at 350. Okay, took a few seconds, but backed it off. Another 350. Okay, starting to warm up a little bit, not bad at all. And now 400 foot-pounds, so we're getting close to its max. Wow. Okay, I'm impressed. I really am. I really thought at 400 foot-pounds, this little guy was going to have a little trouble, but it's really not. I mean, you see it's hammering for a few seconds, but it's doing a great job, and it's staying tight, feels good in the hand. A lot of times when you start hitting some max capability on these impact wrenches on other tools, they start having different sounds, and you can tell it's almost, I wouldn't say they're coming apart, but they just have a different sound to them. The Makita's staying nice and tight and doing very well. So let me go back. I'm going to actually tighten these all down to the max of, I think it's 430. And we're going to do 430 foot-pounds on all 5 of those, and then see how well it does in succinct impacts, if you will, one after the other. So we're going to go to 430 here. There you go, 430 foot-pounds. And by the way, if you don't know what this is High Torque's line gun, and it is a torque bolt driver, basically. This is made to torque bolts. Very, very expensive tool. So it's made to do precise tightening and torquing fasteners. So it's not just it's obviously not an impact wrench, but it is a high quality tool. So basically I'm not missing the mark here. So I'm going to go ahead and just snug these up. There we go. So now we'll use our line gun here at 430. All right, so we have them all torqued down to 430 foot-pounds, all 5 of these. So now we're going to go in reverse mode, and we're going to see if we can back all 5 of those off one after another at the max setting of what Makita calls for this tool. They're calling 430 foot-pounds of nut-busting torque or loosening torque. And that's what we have. We have nuts tightened down to 430 foot-pounds. It should have the loosening torque to be able to break those free. Let's see if it does. There's one. There's two. There's three. 4. And there's 5. Impressive. Okay, so let's go into one of the auto modes here. So now I've got it in auto mode 1, and we'll tighten this up. We'll see what happens. So you see, as soon as it hit, my finger's still on the trigger, it shut off. Again, we'll do it one more time. I mean, as soon as it felt that it was tightened, it shut the tool off. Now let's go to, we'll go auto mode 2 now. And back that up some. Here we go, we're in auto mode 2. So you see it tightened and hit a few times and then stopped. I'll do the same thing again. My finger won't come off the trigger. Watch this. Again, finger still on the trigger and the tool shut off. So that's what that auto tightening mode is going to do. And then you'll see when I go into 3, it'll just hit just quite a bit longer and then shut down. Again, finger still on the trigger. So that's what those auto modes are going to do for you. Now let's watch it when you're in bolt removal mode in those auto modes. So you see it almost stopped. It actually did stop for a split second and then went really slow. So you see what it's doing there. So if that were a lug nut, it's not going to sling that across the shop. Once it senses that it's loosened, it's just going to back that out real slow. Again, my finger is still wide open on the trigger. You see when I let go, pull it again. So it's sensing when that's broken free, slow it down. There you go. Okay, I know that was some long testing, but I just wanted to cover all the bases for you guys and gals and actually cover the modes and things like that, because you always want to know those numbers. So let's get right to it. The facts don't lie. This was just an impressive gun, especially for the size that it is. But let's look at this. So when we were actually tightening those, to remove those tightened bolts after hammering on them for 5 seconds each, basically we had 196, 203.9, 211.6, 202.4, 187.2, 198.7, 228.5, 208.5, 216.0, and 192.8. Now, we actually use a factor of 0.8, basically 80% that we divide by, because it takes less force to loosen a bolt than it does to tighten it. And we've proved over and over, usually that's between 75 and 80 percentile of a factor. So in other words, we're dividing by to increase that number, if you will. So what we get is 245, 254.9, 264.5, 253.0, 234.0, 248.4, 285.6, 260.6, 270.0, and 241.0. Sorry for all those numbers, but as soon as I don't name all those, then somebody will say, well, you didn't name all the numbers. I did it. There you go. Anyway, so an average of 255.7 foot-pounds of fastening torque. They advertise 240 foot-pounds. So our calculations are saying they're outproducing the number they stated. When we did the nut busting torque as well, we see the same thing. We tightened all those to 430 foot-pounds. 5 bolts or nuts back to back to back, had no problem breaking those free. Did it hammer on it a few seconds? Yes. But I would say no longer than 4 or 5 seconds on the longest ones. So it did quite well, because we've seen impact wrenches that have to hammer for 10, 15 seconds to break something free. And any longer than that, I don't like to let it just sit there and hammer, because you start actually breaking down a tool. But anyway, this one did more than what Makita says it will do. I don't know how you argue with those numbers. All the features that it has, quite impressive. As I mentioned, when you look at Makita tools, when you handle Makita tools, they have a bit more refinement than you see in typical power tools. Again, I think it's attributed to that Japanese engineering. They're very critical in their processes and making sure that everything's done to a T to what they're looking at in a tool. So check it out. It's the XWT14, 3-year warranty on this. For the XWT14Z, which is the bare tool, you're going to pay right at $199. Now I checked, and it looks like the Home Depot has it for $189. So I jump on that quick, save 10 bucks there. If you want the kitted tool, it should run you about $399 for the 2 5-amp hour batteries and the charger and the tool and the nice, handsome Makita tool bag. And by the way, if you didn't know, Makita makes tons of accessories. They've got a full-size 1/2-inch impact sockets right here, deep well sockets all the way up to 1.25 inches. Unfortunately, we need 1 3/8, next size up, or 33 millimeters, so we couldn't use them, but great looking accessories as well. So, hey, be sure to check them out. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button if you like this video. Hey, if you didn't like this video, if you thought something was amiss, if you don't mind, hit the down, not the down arrow, hit the thumbs down, but would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and go out and do something nice for someone.